The tragedy of Anissa Jones. Sadly, she was only 18 years old. When you hear the name Buffy, what usually comes to mind? It wouldn't be strange for you to think of actress Anissa Jones on the classic TV sitcom Family Affair. While it's not quite as common today as it once was, Hollywood's history is littered with the bodies of child stars who were ripped off, disposed of, or utterly ignored, driving many of them to alcoholism and/or drug abuse, with resulting psychological scars or, in the worst cases, their deaths. From Jackie Coogan, who was ripped off to the point of destitution by his mother, to the systematic abuse Dennis the Menace star Jane North took from his guardians, an aunt and an uncle. The young cast of Different Strokes and Anissa, there are so many instances, and their roads to stardom never start off that way. Mary Anissa Jones, her middle name meaning little friend, entered the world on March 11, 1958, in Lafayette, Indiana. Her father, John Paul Jones, was, at the time of her birth, an engineering graduate and faculty board member at Purdue University. There he met Anissa's mother, Mary Paula Jones, who was a zoology student at the time. The year after Anissa's birth, Paula gave birth to her brother, Paul. Shortly thereafter, the family moved to Playa del Rey, California, where her father worked at Hughes Aircraft while also teaching at the University of Southern California. The family's move to California took place while the kids were still toddlers. Paula enrolled Anissa in a dance class when she was 4 years old. The parents divorced shortly after moving to California, and Mrs. Jones suddenly had to look for a job. A neighbor who had a child making TV commercials suggested that Mrs. Jones get Anissa started in the same field. Some 4 commercials later, Anissa was seen and signed by a producer of Family Affair for the part of Buffy. Acting proved to be the big break for the Jones family. Jeffrey Mark, a creative guiding force behind a number of Inside Television's greatest and behind the fame documentaries, notes that by its very nature, the shooting schedule of Family Affair was a boon financially, but a recipe for disaster for the children. Brian Keith had the same deal with Don Feddersen that Fred McMurray had on My 3 Sons. Brian explains, which is the show would not be named after them, so they wouldn't have to be the center of every episode, and that they'd only have to work 6 or 10 weeks a year, depending on the season. So all of their scenes, all of their shots from the entire season were filmed all at once. All the bedroom shots, all of the kitchen shots, all of the living room shots, and they would all later be edited into individual episodes. Then, he adds, the cast and whatever guest cast there were there for that episode would have to come back, and one by one they would shoot the episodes in order. So the whole season would have to be written beforehand. They didn't do them one at a time. Brian got out of work quickly, but then you have children who cannot work for full days. So it was very hard to work for Johnny and Anissa. And then, once she turned 18, Kathy took the brunt of it, because she could then stay late and they couldn't. Buffy Davis, of course, was the part that made America fall in love with Anissa, and the character's doll, Mrs. Beasley, which would eventually fly off of toy shelves. She was also put in front of reporter microphones on a regular basis. For instance, in 1967, the Los Angeles Times spoke to her commenting, "Every Monday night, little Anissa Jones enters the wonderful world of make-believe for a half hour to play Buffy, the tiny tot on CBS's Family Affair." But away from the series, the studio, and her career, Anissa could pass for a typical 9-year-old, somewhat precocious but very natural and unaffected by her showbiz activities. In that interview, Anissa talked about her love of art and the fact that she used to have 54 pets, which caused her mother to raise an eyebrow in response. I had 50 baby frogs and 4 other pets, 2 kittens and their mother and a parakeet, she explained. But the poor bird is starving. It never eats. And do you know why? I forget to feed him. Okay. She also expressed her preference for a pool over the ocean, mostly because you're unaware of what size wave you're going to get hit with. You never know how deep it is, she said. But in a pool, it's marked 2 feet, 3 feet, so you know. That's the trouble with the ocean. It doesn't say how deep it is. And then there was her side business of selling perfume. The idea being that she takes loads of flowers, adds a little bit of water, and then smash, smash, smash. The perfume is bottled, and she sells the bottles for 10 cents each, going house to house. The source of the flowers? The neighbors' yards, she responded matter-of-factly. Sometimes we just pick the flowers and then sell them, but we're always careful not to sell the flowers to the lady that we picked them from. Unfortunately, there were already issues developing, partially from the divorce and partially from the impact of the show. Said Patty at the time, she is always ready to say, "Please call me Anissa," whenever people refer to her as Buffy, her name on the show. I do think she likes being recognized in public. It has some meaning. In October 1967, the same paper ran another piece on her in which Anissa explained how she makes herself cry. "I hate it. When it's a real happy day, then I have to do a scene where I have to cry. I have to think of something sad, and then I have to think of it all day. I can't make real tears, you know, but I can make a crying sound." By 1970, Anissa was doing public appearances every other weekend, drawing thousands of people, but allowed her very little private time. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone less than 10 years old. Less so where one has a good family life, where one has parents really working on behalf of the children to make sure their lives are as normal as possible. Where that love and affection are not only given because of the paycheck they're bringing in. In Anissa's case, this wasn't true. Her father and mother divorced. Her mother was a pushy stage mother who, after Anissa's father died, pushed her to be the family breadwinner. By the time the show ended and she could finally say goodbye to Mrs. Beasley, Anissa was at a career crossroads. She wanted to make the move to the big screen, but didn't find many people willing to take a chance on her or the image of her that had been created. One role she auditioned for was Linda Blair's in 1973's The Exorcist, but director William Friedkin believed that the audience wouldn't see the character Regan McNeil possessed, but rather Buffy. In 1975, she was given an invitation to audition for what would become Jodie Foster's part of Iris, Easy Steensma, in Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. But she turned the opportunity down, as much as she had Brian Keith's invitation to be a part of his 1972 to 1974 series, The Brian Keith Show. As far as she was, she decided to enroll at Westchester High School in Los Angeles to try and achieve some normalcy in her life. But that didn't really happen, points out Jeffrey. Her life kind of spiraled out of control. Her mother and father had fought bitterly over custody of Anissa and her brother Paul. He won and Anissa went to live with him, but he died very shortly after Anissa arrived. But she didn't go back to her mother. She moved in with a friend. Why in the world would her mother allow that? Bad parenting. She became a ward of the court, and anyone who knows anything about drugs would have been watching her behavior and would have known. Anissa was in trouble. Petty shoplifting, taking jobs and then quitting them, bad sleeping patterns, bad eating patterns, incredible mood swings. He elaborates. When she turned 18 in March of 76, she received the forced savings from her salary on Family Affair, and then another amount of money that had been held for her in trust. She received a little less than $200,000, which she blew almost immediately in 4 or 5 months. Sadly, it all came to an end for Anissa on August 28, 1976, at the age of 18, following a night of partying with a number of others, including her then-boyfriend, in the beach town of Oceanside, California. She suffered from an overdose that took her life. The coroner would later report that she had cocaine, PCP, Quaaludes, and Seconal in her system. 6 days later, her doctor, Don Carlos Moschnos, was arrested and charged with manslaughter for illegally prescribing Seconal to her. While awaiting trial, he died, resulting in the case being closed. Following a private service, Anissa was cremated and her ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean. Goodbye, Anissa Jones.